In a world where power is measured by the brand of your watch and the price of your supercar, silence can sometimes be the most dangerous declaration of war. The Monte Carlo Elegance Expo was not meant for those who simply walked in by mistake. This was where the architects of global markets gathered people whose slightest nod could send stocks skyrocketing or crashing. And in the midst of that extravagant setting, where everyone wore tuxedos and walked across polished black marble under the glow of crystal chandeliers, she appeared like a scratch across a flawless canvas. No invitation, no VIP badge, no designer logos on her body. Just a plain linen dress, a pair of worn-out flats, neatly tied-back hair, and her eyes that didn't dodge a single gaze but seemed to measure every person in the room. Her old Ford F-150 was parked among a sea of supercars, as if it were daring the entire social order to challenge her presence. It could have ended with a few annoyed glances, if not for Celeste Lemaire. Celeste, the heiress of Sterling Motors, raised among car collections more valuable than blood live streaming every move with a sapphire-studded phone. She swung the lens toward Isabella and laughed like she'd spotted a stain in a $1 million showroom. What is this maid showing up at the wrong shift? Who allowed her into this place? Her voice sweet as honey, but poured like acid into the ears of hundreds of thousands, watching online triggered laughter that spread like a reflex. A man nearby smirked. She probably thinks this is some used car market in the suburbs. Another gentleman, swirling a glass of champagne, chuckled. The world really is hilarious these days. But while everyone laughed, while the camera zoomed in on the creases in her dress and the scuffs on her shoes, there was one thing no one noticed: her eyes. Isabella wasn't looking for an exit. She was looking straight at the people who were laughing. No bowed head, no flinch. While they saw a poor woman, she saw a room full of people so wealthy they no longer recognized how empty they truly were. They thought they were humiliating someone. They didn't know. They were setting the stage for an event that the European elite would remember by just 2 words: regret. The laughter in the hall was no longer mere mockery. It had become a ritual, an orchestrated public execution, where the victim didn't need to be tied up, just not resist. Isabella had only taken a few steps past the first row of supercars when a live stream camera was shoved inches from her face. Celeste was still broadcasting to over 300,000 global viewers, coating her venom in syrupy sweetness as she spoke. She's probably looking for a car to dust. Anyone got a rag? A pink-haired influencer strutted over, tossed a glass cleaning cloth at Isabella, her tone sugary but her gaze razor-sharp. Please don't leave fingerprints on my Lamborghini. It hates the smell of poverty. The crowd burst out laughing. A man in a tuxedo waved a fake auction paddle and shouted, $1 for her mud truck. Any takers? Another gentleman flipped a coin that rolled to a stop at Isabella's feet. Here's a tip if you clean properly and bow just right. She stood there motionless, in the center of the human circle, shoulders, squared eyes unbending. Her dress was now stained with latte. Her shoes had been stepped on. Someone had even taped a paper sign to her back that read, "Guest appearance farm maid." Still, she said nothing. The crowd, intoxicated by cruelty, began live streaming from every angle. Comments flooded in like wildfire. This is iconic fashion disaster of the year. Who let the farmer crash the gala? Hand her a broom. Might as well give her a purpose. A group of socialites in haute couture strutted toward her, pretending to be fashion judges. One of them whispered loudly enough for the mic to catch, "That linen dress must have been recycled from a church curtain." Another sneered, "Those shoes belong in a museum under the fashion tragedy exhibit." Celeste glided in, so smoothly that it almost looked like compassion. But then, with deliberate grace, she reached out and poured a fresh espresso straight down Isabella's bodice. Her voice sliced through the noise like a blade against silk. "There, now it matches your truck, darling." The room detonated, a storm of laughter, clapping, and camera clicks. No one was filming the luxury cars anymore. They were filming her silence, filming the way a woman with no power and no voice was being stripped of dignity in front of a privileged circus. And as hundreds of phones rose like arrows aimed at her chest, only one pair of eyes held steady Isabella's. No shaking, no tears, no backing down. No one realized that the woman being turned into a spectacle was the only one in the room who wasn't performing, because the one who stays real is always the one about to rewrite the ending. When the crowd fails to make you kneel with contempt, they'll turn to pity, weaponized as charity, to suffocate you. And in Monte Carlo, that kind of charity is performed like a fine art. Celeste gave a theatrical sigh, picked up a name badge from the reception desk, and scribbled across it, "Isabella, vehicle cleaning assistant." She held it up in the center of the grand hall, smiling like a philanthropist saving the world. She should feel honored. Not everyone gets the chance to work among cars worth more than a national budget. We could hold a fundraiser. Who wants to sponsor a latte for our brave little helper? Damien jeered, waving a €500 note as if tossing bread at a street beggar. "We'll even give her a whole week of car washing duty." The pay, a condescending smile from the elite. A table was set up right in the middle of the hall. On it lay a handwritten mock contract, a Mont Blanc pen, and a cheap glass of champagne, like some official signing ceremony for a demeaning role the whole world was waiting to witness. Isabella stood in the middle of the circle, still gripping the dirty cloth, her dress soaked in espresso. She was surrounded by live-stream lenses, laughter, and syrupy voices that cut like sugar-coated blades. "Go ahead, sign it. That's the most you'll ever hope for in this life. Either scrub cars or leave this place like the broke failure you are. A job that suits your outfit better than these marble floors ever will." Another socialite daughter of a luxury watch CEO stepped forward and threw down a fake business card onto the table. It read, "Isabella Royce, marble floor hygiene specialist." The crowd applauded. They laughed. They snapped photos. They called it soft justice. But there was one person who didn't laugh. Isabella. She looked at the name badge for a second, then raised her gaze to each and every person, laughing, not with pain, but with the look of someone listening to the countdown ticking inside her mind. They thought they'd won. They didn't realize they had just signed their own indictment. Isabella didn't sign the fake contract. She didn't drop the cloth. She didn't respond to the jeers being broadcast live to hundreds of thousands around the world. She simply looked. A long, steady gaze, not angry, not pleading, not vengeful, just done. And then she turned away, not in haste, not needing to be stopped. She walked through the crowd like someone invisible, not because she was small, but because they no longer had the stature to hold her gaze. Every step she took across the marble floor echoed with the mocking applause behind her, like stones hurled at the back of someone who had nothing left to lose. Damien flung a napkin after her, waving his arm like discarding trash. "Take this to wipe your tears, hero of the bottom class." Celeste laughed, her voice cutting clearly through the hall's microphone. She'll remember this day forever. The day she got to be among the elite as a living example of fashion failure. None of them realized they weren't sending off a loser. They were witnessing the ignition of a revolution. Isabella walked past luxury cars, past camera flashes, past their belief that she didn't belong. No one knew where she was going. No one thought she'd ever come back, and every single one of them was certain of one thing: she won't dare face this again. Someone like that only knows how to disappear in silence. What they didn't understand was that silence is the most terrifying sound of all. Because that woman didn't need revenge, she only needed to walk away, to prepare to place the entire world exactly where it belongs. Exactly 30 minutes after Isabella walked out of the Monte Carlo Elegance Expo, the ground beneath the Grand Hall began to tremble, just slightly, but enough to make the champagne glass in Celeste's hand quiver like a warning from the universe. Then, a roar. Not the engine of a supercar, not the background music of the gala, but the sound of steel treads grinding against marble. The main gates swung open, no guards needed. A matte black Leclerc XLR tank bearing the emblem of Royce Defense Holdings slowly rolled into the center of the showroom like it had owned the space all along. Silence blanketed the room. Phones stopped streaming. Champagne glasses fell and shattered, and no one dared to pick them up. The ones who had laughed the loudest now stepped back the fastest. Then the hatch of the tank cracked open. Isabella stepped out, still wearing the same old linen dress, still in those worn-out flats. But her eyes were no longer remembering. They were delivering judgment. She walked up to the very podium that had displayed million-dollar cars, took the microphone already set there, and without raising her voice, spoke with a tone calm and cold, slicing through the air like a verdict falling stone by stone. Sorry to interrupt your little party, but it seems I brought my own vehicle. A sharp crack echoed the sound of marble fracturing under the tank's weight. The entire hall froze. Olivia, the one who had called her a maid, stood speechless. Damien clenched the armrest of his chair, his face drained of color. Alain Moreau, president of the expo, looked like his knees might buckle. No one moved. No one laughed. Because now, the woman they had called trash had driven a nightmare made of steel straight into their world. She didn't need to threaten anyone. She didn't need to name names. She just had to show up, and every mask in that room shattered on its own. No one said a word. The entire hall fell into a silence so heavy it felt like even the air was afraid to breathe. The woman they had mocked, humiliated, turned into a global punchline, was now standing at the center of them all, right in the middle of the very power they once believed only belonged to them. Isabella didn't need to raise her voice. She simply tapped the holographic screen mounted beside the tank. A soft blue glow projected forward, casting onto the lobby floor a series of legal documents, each stamped with official seals from the French government. A voice from the onboard system read aloud like a verdict, echoing across the room: current sovereign ownership of the Monte Carlo Elegance Expo premises, Royce Defense Holdings. Official transfer signed yesterday, finalized today at 16:43. A gentle beeping sounded from the control panel. Then, Isabella lifted her head and looked directly at Alain Moreau, the man who once told her she wasn't worthy of walking on marble floors. I don't need anyone's permission, because I bought this place. A ripple of shock swept through the crowd. Some couldn't even bring themselves to meet her gaze, as if looking too long would pull them into a reality they didn't want to accept. Isabella continued, her voice as cold and sharp as steel. I'm Isabella Royce, CEO of Royce Defense Holdings, the largest defense contractor in Europe. And as you can see, not a single vehicle in this hall has display clearance, since the property now falls under the newly designated Military Security Zone, R7. All vehicles may be subject to immediate seizure for national security inspection. The screen shifted. A new display emerged, lists of companies, each accompanied by their debt amounts, in glaring red sterling motors, $47.8 million in outstanding debt. Volkov Enterprises, 31.2 million pending legal review. Autolux Holding, 66 million unpaid and overdue. Damien froze. Celeste faltered. Alain Moreau's hands trembled, his lips dry. The very names that once shook markets now appeared as debtors to the woman they had dismissed as the help. "I didn't come here to be accepted," Isabella said, sweeping her gaze across the room. "I came to announce that you've been living in a fantasy for far too long." And in that moment, those who once sat front row, who once raised champagne glasses to mock her, suddenly felt the entire hall tilt toward the only woman who didn't need a microphone to make the whole world fall silent. The air in the hall grew thick, like someone had sealed off all the oxygen. The same people who had once applauded when coffee was poured down Isabella's dress now held their breath as she walked back toward the waiting tank. No one spoke. No one stood in her way. She tapped the control screen once more. The treads of the Leclerc XLR roared to life. Calmly, she turned the tank, then drove forward, crushing Damien Volkov's Koenigsegg Jesko Absolute beneath the crystal chandeliers where it had gleamed as a symbol of elite status. The sound of carbon fiber shredding split the air like tortured metal screaming through the gates of hell. Spectators screamed. Damien collapsed to his knees, clutching his head like he'd just lost a limb. But she wasn't done. Isabella turned the turret, rotated it to the right, and pointed it at Celeste Lemaire's blazing red Ferrari LaFerrari, once displayed like a queen on center stage. Boom! A calculated hit, not forceful, but deliberate. The Ferrari slammed into the glass wall, shattering on impact like the illusion of power Celeste once mistook for truth. Celeste screamed, lunged forward, but the security team, now loyal to Isabella, held her back with a cold, impassive calm. Isabella didn't look at them. She looked at the stage, looked at the hall, and declared, "The Monte Carlo Elegance Expo effective immediately will be transformed into the Royce Institute for Tactical Development, a military technology and survival academy dedicated to disabled children, war orphans, and those left behind by the world you built." She turned toward Alain Moreau, the man who had once ordered her to be thrown out. "You once told me I wasn't qualified to stand here. Today, I invite you to leave my facility." The first applause came from an old soldier seated near the back, then another, then a third. And suddenly, the entire rear section, the part no one had cared to look at, before rose to their feet and saluted her with military precision. An elderly French colonel stepped forward. He raised his chin eyes, misting with pride. "From this moment forward, no one is allowed to call you maid. We call you commander." The once proud elite lowered their heads, not because they were forced to, but because they no longer deserved to look her in the eye. After that day, the name Isabella Royce was no longer just a name. It became a scar etched into the opulent walls that once rejected her. News outlets around the world reported on the incident of the woman in the tank, drawing in millions of views overnight. But what shocked people the most wasn't the military force she brought. It was the ruthless precision of kindness wielded with purpose. Celeste Lemaire lost her inheritance. Sterling Motors fell under financial investigation and lost its market value in just 48 hours. Damien Volkov vanished from all public appearances, and his father resigned from the European Union's Financial Council. Alain Moreau was stripped of his honorary title at Autolux, and his name hasn't been spoken at a single Riviera Gala since. And Isabella She declined every interview request. She didn't appear on television. She didn't sign a single commercial deal after the event. Instead, She quietly unveiled a steel monument in the center of Monte Carlo's Grand Hall, the very place that once served as her stage of humiliation. Carved onto the surface were just 3 words: "For the unseen." And below that, her name without title, only one line cold as stone. She didn't destroy the system. She rewrote it. Each year, hundreds of disabled and war-affected children are trained, taught technology, and graduate from the Royce Institute. None of them know that the founder was once called a maid, but every child understands that here, no one judges you by the shoes you wear, only by whether you dare to lift your eyes. And those who once laughed, they no longer speak her name, not because they forgot, but because to mention her would be to remember who they once were and how utterly they fell. She didn't need to scream. She didn't need to retaliate. She just walked, leaving the mark of metal treads across the marble floor, and a story that the most powerful people in the world would never dare to tell aloud. The story of Isabella Royce makes me believe in one simple truth. Some people weren't born to fit into this world. They were born to make it reflect on itself. She didn't fight back with words. She didn't flaunt her power. She walked quietly but resolutely, as if every insult hurled at her had been tucked away, only to be returned in the form of a legacy no one could ever dismantle. The lesson here isn't about revenge. It's about holding on to your integrity when the world wants you to let it go. Don't be fooled by appearances. Don't let the crowd's laughter make you doubt your worth. The one they mock today might be the one who owns the floor they're standing on tomorrow. And if you just once have ever been looked down on because you didn't look like them, then this story is for you, to remind you that silence, when chosen wisely, is the most powerful weapon of all. If you believe in those who never give in, if you believe that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, then stay with us. Subscribe now, don't wait, because Toch story tells what no one else dares to say. One story, one lesson, one moment that reaches your heart. Each video is proof that true strength doesn't come from screaming. It comes from quiet, unwavering resolve. Toch story has many more to tell, and if you're ready, we'll write the rest together.